Now, considering this season is all about breaking down the horror film adaptations of Stephen King, I suppose we should begin with the hot water Mr. King found himself in earlier this month. Politico published a report detailing an allegation of sexual assault against Maine Democratic Party Senate candidate Graham Plattner, and Stephen King, of course, being Maine's probably most famous export, came to his defense by writing on X, quote, "Tell you what, if you knew the whole truth about everyone in the Senate and House of Reps, those chambers would be dead empty. Jesus said, let him without sin cast the first stone," end quote. Big yikes. People were understandably upset about this. On one hand, I mean, Stephen King is correct. Politics, in most cases, is a large cesspool. However, that does not excuse confirmed or at least strongly alleged cesspool activities from a candidate. So yeah, probably should have sat this one out. Or better yet, just say, hey guys, sexual assault is bad. I do not condone this, period, full stop. But instead, he doubled down in a since deleted tweet saying, quote, "Graham Plattner may drop out. I hope he doesn't. But meanwhile, the abuser in chief keeps on keeping on," end quote. Yeah, we're all aware that our abuser in chief is a piece of shit, but that doesn't excuse piece of shit activities from other people just because they're part of Team Donkey instead of Team Elephant. So yeah, tough day in the office for Stephen King. Me personally, I don't think he's like a rape apologist or condones sexual assault. I think he was just really, really tone deaf and said some dumb shit. So I'm not coming at him with my pitchfork out, but obviously I am not rocking with the comments, but that doesn't mean I'm going to like cancel this season or anything. We're going to power through. We're going to try to separate the art from the artist, or the art that's based on the art from the artist, and continue with our season 4. So anyway, on a lighter note, I'm Brandon O. This is Terrorific, and we're chopping up 1995's The Mangler. Welcome back to the place where it's perpetually spooky season. This episode is brought to you by DFW Landscaping Services, your local experts for complete outdoor solutions in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. From routine mowing to full front and backyard transformations, they keep your curb appeal sharp and your weekends free. Their team specializes in custom hardscapes, vibrant flower and tree beds, and total lawn care tailored to the North Texas climate. They believe in being built for Texas and designed for living. Reach out to Matt and Cody today for a free quote at 469-389-0333 or visit them online at landscapingservicesdfw.com. That's 469-389-0333. Let's build something great together. Be sure you're following at Terrorific Podcast on IG, because every Thursday leading up to a new episode, I post a clue to what movie that episode will cover, and anyone who guesses it correctly earns themselves a shout out in that episode. This week's clue was a photo of a stack of folded linen sheets, which is a reference to the speed iron and folding machine that is the eponymous Mangler. Guesses that I received included The Shining, Killer Towel the movie, which sounds like it'd be a banger by the way, and Beetlejuice, which unfortunately is not a Stephen King adaptation. Once I saw that guess come through, I was like having doubts myself, so I had to Google it. But yeah, it's in fact not a Stephen King adaptation. So there were 3 people who correctly guessed The Mangler, all of whom have gotten correct guesses in prior episodes as well. So first we had Rick from the Whole Damn Enchilada YouTube channel that covers everything related to horror movies, including new releases, classics, unboxings, etc. We had Maggie from Skipper Scream, which is a horror movie recap podcast that asks if the scream is worth the stream, and she co-hosts along with her sister Cassie. And finally, yet again, for like the 18th time, it feels like, Missy from Grimly, which, as you know by now, is a podcast that covers the creepy and unexplained, from true crime to urban legends and haunted histories, that she co-hosts along with her friend Meg. Skipper Scream and Grimly, by the way, are also my fellow members of the independent spooky podcast group, The Creators Collective. You can follow our group account on IG and check out our full lineup of shows. That handle is at Spooky Pod Squad. I've included links down in the show notes for the latest content from the whole damn enchilada, Skipper Scream and Grimly, so be sure to check those out. And well done on those guesses. So now let's move on to The Mangler. The Mangler was adapted from Stephen King's 1972 short story of the same name, which appeared in his inaugural short story collection, 1978's Night Shift, which I am actually currently reading. So I just read the Mangler short story like a week ago, and it's only like 20 pages. So the fact that they were able to make an entire film out of this, or out of that source material, is a testament to the creativity in Hollywood, but also kind of explains why the movie kind of ran off the rails a little bit. But 2 prior episodes from this season also feature movies adapted from stories in Night Shift. So in The King's Chariot, I chopped up Maximum Overdrive, which was adapted from the story Trucks. And in the episode Fur the Streets, I chopped up Cat's Eye, which is an anthology film consisting of 3 stories, 2 of which appear in Night Shift, Quitters Inc. and The Ledge. Fur the Streets is probably my personal favorite episode so far this season, so if you're new to the Terrorific party, I recommend giving that episode a listen once we're done here. The idea for The Mangler came from the fact that one of the jobs Stephen King held down before he blew up was as a worker in an industrial laundry. The film was directed and co-written by one of the most influential filmmakers in horror history and my fellow Texas native, Tobe Hooper. His filmography includes directing 1974's iconic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, along with its 1986 sequel, as well as another classic, 1982's Poltergeist. His working relationship with Stephen King also included directing the 1979 Salem's Lot television miniseries. His co-writer on The Mangler was Harry Allen Towers under the pseudonym Peter Welbeck, who produced more than 80 feature films throughout his career, ranging from the early 60s to the early 2000s. The cast of The Mangler includes Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund in the role of Bill Gartley, Ted Levine as Officer John Hunton, Daniel Matmore as Mark Jackson, Vanessa Pike as Sherry Oulette, Dimitri Phillips as George Stanner, and Lisa Morris as Lynn Sue. The film only grossed a paltry $1.8 million at the box office on an unknown budget. My guess is that it wasn't very high though, based on the quality of this film. It holds an average rating of 2.7 on Letterboxd, and I rated it a 1 myself. This is a B movie with a capital B, but it's missing most of the fun that typically is associated with those B movies. There are some funny lines here and there, but this was a tough watch for me, which is crazy considering that like 3 of the biggest names and figures in horror, Stephen King, Tobe Hooper, and Robert Englund, all collaborating together. Yet somehow this was the result, but I guess everybody is entitled to an off day every once in a while. But here at Terrorific, the quality of the film itself is a tertiary concern. What matters above all is how ridiculous, how absurd are the happenings in said film. And let me tell you, The Mangler has some absurd happenings. So let's get into it. The film was set in Rikers Valley, Maine, and it opens with a bunch of folks working in an industrial laundry factory called Blue Ribbon Laundry. And low-key, it's a miracle any clothes in this place actually got cleaned, because holy shit, the conditions are really bad. It looks Like, if you spend more than 2 seconds in there, you're going to come out just like covered in soot and other filth. Like, these fools were definitely violating some labor laws for sure. But anyway, we see a young woman named Sherry. She's working on a speed iron and folding machine, trying to get a sheet ready to send through. And the other worker that she's like partnered with on this task tells her to tighten the clamps on the belts so they can get a bigger load in. Sorry, I'm like 13 apparently, but she ends up cutting her hand pretty badly on the metal lever. And for some reason, she like flings her blood into the machine, like shakes her hand all over the place. Hella unsanitary. But as she's doing this, there's also 2 dudes lugging a big ass icebox right behind her, and they almost run into her. And so she like dives out of the way, but they end up like losing their balance and drop the icebox. So it ends up hitting the machine, which somehow causes lightning to fire off. And like, nobody really questions this. There is literally lightning coming from an industrial cleaning machine and an icebox making contact with one another. And they just chalk this up as just another day in Blue Ribbon. But after all this hullabaloo, people are kind of just milling around, not really working. And so the factory's owner, Mr. Gartley, from his elevated position, like on the catwalk kind of area above the factory floor, he like cracks the whip and tells everyone to get their shit together and get back to work. And Sherry's blood runs through the machine. We then encounter Mrs. Frawley, who was like this sweet older woman in the factory, and she's feeling under the weather, so she's popping a bottle of antacids. And as she opens the bottle, the factory foreman, Stanner, pops up behind her to tell her to quit dicking around and get back to work, and this startles her, which causes her to spill the contents of the bottle onto the tread of this speed iron and folding machine. A few of them get caught on the safety bar of the machine, so she reaches out to grab them, and when she does, the safety bar lifts, which ends up grabbing hold of her hand and subsequently pulls in the rest of her body into the machine, and folks struggle to pull her out until eventually she is pulled all the way in. And Mr. Gartley sees all this happening and drops one of his many interesting one-liners. He says, "Hell's bells, Adele." I don't even know what that means. But one worker smashes the off button on the machine, but it does absolutely nothing. And Mrs. Frawley gets pulled all the way in and blood sprays all over the place. And the practical effects here, I will say, is like the highlight of the film. There are some instances where they use like some CGI or whatever, and it doesn't look the greatest, but the practical effects are pretty decent. So I will give that its due flowers. But the unseriousness of that Hell's Bells Adele line was kind of my first indicator that this movie may not be the best. But after this, we are introduced to Officer Johnny Hunton. He gets called to the scene at the Blue Ribbon Laundry while he happens to be in the middle of writing up a ticket for the 2 dudes who have hauled the icebox from the place. They're taking it somewhere, and while they're driving, they almost collide with Johnny's car, and there's this whole exchange where they're going back and forth, and Johnny's like, "Hey, asshole, watch where you're going," blah, blah, blah. But as Johnny arrives on the scene, he asks Stanner to show him what happened, and he says he can't look at it again because it makes him sick. And he points down to the end of the machine and says, "Hey, yeah, she's down there. If you want to go take a look, be my guest." And Johnny does. And on the way, as he's like walking there, he's like kind of like talking shit about Stanner, like, "Oh, wow, you can't look, huh? Well, maybe if you guys weren't cutting corners and trying to dodge and duck safety standards, maybe this wouldn't have happened to begin with." But as soon as he gets a look at the aftermath of Mrs. Frawley, he throws up. And he's like, "What the fuck is this?" And he heads back outside to collect himself while he sits in his car. And a worker named Annette follows him out and says that she knows how he feels because something is off about that machine and seeing it makes her sick to her stomach. And she offers Johnny a bottle of antacids. It may have been the same bottle from Mrs. Frawley. It's not like she'll need them anymore, but side note, people chewing medicine or the thought of chewing medicine is so disgusting to me. Like, chewables shouldn't be a thing past the age of like 3, in my opinion. And so when I saw Johnny pop these antacids and just chewing them up, I was like, this is fucking disgusting. I know it has to taste like shit because these pharmaceutical flavors are always like grape or cherry and it's so medicinal tasting. I cannot stand it. I don't know how you feel about it, but for me personally, that shit is gross. And there are multiple instances where Johnny is just like going to town munching on these things throughout the film like it's a fucking bottle of Tic Tacs, and I could not stand it. But as Johnny sits there snacking on his antacids, the sheriff pulls up with a judge and some Poindexter looking ass safety inspector, and they head inside the factory. Johnny gets up to follow them, but at the same time, the coroners bring Mrs. Frawley's body out, and they are carrying her in a laundry basket because after going through the speed iron and folding machine, Mrs. Frawley was speed ironed and folded. Big yikes. That is an awful way to go out. I can't even imagine, like, how do you fold up a person and just have them stuck in a basket? These dudes didn't even bother to like put her in a body bag. They're just like, hey, you know, this shit's hella convenient. It's right here, you know, easy handles to carry with. We'll just load her up like that. I don't think they even covered her up, bro. It was just a pile of neatly folded human. Wow. And this may be a stretch, but I feel like if I squint hard enough, I can kind of see a message here related to how we treat older people in society, or specifically American society, and more specifically like our parents. So I'm interpreting Mrs. Frawley being neatly folded and shipped out to the morgue as a hyperbolic representation of how some people neatly fold up and pack their parents to be shipped off to a nursing home or care facility or whatever it may be. Sherry even says that she viewed Mrs. Frawley as a mother figure, so again, it may be a stretch, but I thought that was interesting. But inside the factory, they're testing the machine's safety features before allowing Blue Ribbon to resume operations. They start it up, and the inspector says that lifting the safety bar should cause the machine to shut off, and it does. He says that lowering the bar again should cause the machine to start back up, and it does. So the judge declares Mrs. Frawley's death an accident and closes the inquest. But something about this whole situation, and especially the speed at which the inquest was closed, smells a little fishy to Johnny. Later that night, Johnny is talking to his brother-in-law, Mark, who dabbles in demonology, about what happened to Mrs. Frawley. Mark worked at an industrial laundry spot when he was in college, so he's familiar with speed iron and folding machines. He says they are affectionately known as manglers. Mark says it's impossible for anyone to get pulled into one because of the safety bar feature, but Johnny says, well, I mean, this shit happened anyway, bro. So Mark asked whose ass is on the line for the situation, and Johnny says no one, because Gardley owns the judge and the judge owns the sheriff. This town has a long history of corruption, apparently dating back to when they used to burn supposed witches at the stake. They've been having this conversation in Mark's backyard, but he and Johnny are next door neighbors, so Johnny heads inside his own house to grab a beer, and then he proceeds to offer Mark the single most unhinged thing a host has ever offered a guest in the history of hospitality. He's like, hey bro, you want some yogurt? What? Of all the things to offer somebody as you're sitting in the backyard hanging out, drinking beers. You offer some yogurt. That does not even sound appetizing, and like the consistency of those two together, like chasing beer with yogurt and that fucking thickness of it, that shit sounds like a horrible mouthfeel. But these dudes are two peas in a pod apparently, because Mark is unfazed by the question. He only wants to know if the yogurt is whole wheat, which is equally unhinged. Meanwhile, over at the Blue Ribbon Laundry, a few workers approach the Mangler and one of its hoses comes loose, which sprays them with piping hot steam. One of the workers, Lin Su, goes into Gartley's office and he uses his power to coerce her into keeping her mouth shut about this latest incident. He then points to the bathroom and tells her to go draw herself a bath and freshen up for Uncle Billy, which, one, I sure hope he isn't really her uncle. Two, who the fuck has a bathtub in their office? And three, this is extremely creepy, pervy behavior. And trigger warning, right when she's about to shut the bathroom door, she reluctantly and very visibly, uncomfortably stops herself and asks Gartley if he'd like to come in and keep her company. And this dude looks so pervy and disgusting, and he's literally gargling phlegm in his throat while he stares at her. What the fuck? But apparently they have some sort of sexual relationship, and the consensuality of it is highly questionable. Johnny gets a call about the steam hose incident. 3 women were burned, including Annette, who was the one who gave him the bottle of antacids earlier in the film, and she's actually been hospitalized, so he and Mark head over there to speak with her. Annette says these accidents started happening right after Sherry cut her hand on the clamp of the Mangler, and Mark hears this and asks if Sherry bled on the Mangler, and Annette confirms that she did. While she's high on morphine because she's hella burned, Annette says it's almost like the machine tasted blood and found it liked it. But she dismisses this as a woman's funny idea. Annette also mentions that Sherry is Mr. Gartley's niece, and he keeps a very close eye on her and has done so for her entire life. He won't let her have any boyfriends or go on any dates, and it's just very strange behavior. Johnny and Mark head back home, and Mark shows Johnny a book on magic and the occult. Mark asks if Johnny has considered that the machine may be possessed, but Johnny needs some convincing. He explains that all spells can be reduced to common denominators, some sort of herbal or human catalyst. Mark goes on to say that the most powerful spells always use belladonna, which is the highly toxic plant also known as deadly nightshade, native to Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia. Every part of the plant can be fatal if ingested, especially the berries and the leaves, which cause severe hallucinations, delirium, and eventually heart failure. Mark also says that the most common ingredient among these spells is virgin's blood, and that Sherry seems to fit the mold based on how Annette described her situation with Gartley. Johnny thinks this all sounds hella outlandish, but he humors Mark, and they drive to Sherry's house to ask if she's a virgin. How fucking awkward is that? When they arrive, the house is all dark and has like gothic architecture and just general creepy vibes. Like if you were to close your eyes right now and picture what a house would look like if it was home to occult activities, this house is probably what you're going to be picturing. Sherry lets them in and Johnny begins his questioning. She tells them about the icebox falling and the lightning shooting out of the machine. Johnny chalks it all up to a short circuit, and the icebox hitting the safety bar caused the Mangler to malfunction, so he's ready to get up on out of there. But Mark is like, wait, are you a virgin though? Before Johnny shoves him out of the door and they leave, he's like, yo, what the fuck? Why would you ask her that? And Mark's like, bro, isn't that the whole reason we came here? Like the relationship between these two is my second favorite aspect of this film after the practical effects, because it's like real buddy cop comedy vibes. Johnny is so overly serious and Mark is so unserious that the two of them together is ridiculous. But as they drive back home, they see police and other first responders at a neighbor's house, and the icebox is sitting on the front lawn. Another neighbor's son somehow got trapped inside of it and suffocated. Jeez. The neighbor who owns that house, Mrs. Smith, said the icebox isn't hers. She just came home from work and saw it sitting there on her lawn, and when she opened it, that's when she made her grisly discovery. Mark notices that the icebox has a label that says property of Blue Ribbon Laundry, and it also has Sherry's bloody handprint over it. It's wearing it like a badge of honor. Mark theorizes that there was a transference of evil when it made contact with the Mangler, and to drive this point home, they open the door to reveal multiple dead birds inside. Mark reaches inside to pull out a bird that is still living, and as he does so, the icebox door slams shut on his arm. And now he's freaking out a little bit, because up until this point, this has all just been theories and hypotheticals, but now shit's starting to feel a little bit real. Johnny then delivers his signature catchphrase. He calls the icebox a miserable piece of dog fuck before bashing it repeatedly with a sledgehammer. And this causes a supernatural vortex to begin swirling above it, and lightning bolts are shooting out and shit, before Mark recites some sort of incantation that calms things down and seemingly banishes whatever the fuck was happening with the icebox. But now, Johnny, after being so skeptical, he's definitely a believer. But let's pause the movie recap, because I need to go on a tangent. All this mention of icebox reminds me of one of the greatest songs of my generation, Icebox by Omarion. That shit was my anthem my senior year of high school. It was my ringtone. It was my MySpace page profile song, all that shit. And let me tell you why. Like late summer, early fall of my senior year of high school, I go to the Subway that's close to my house. And there are two girls working there who are about my age. And one of them, the one who's making my sandwich, is like, hey, you know, my homegirl down there, she thinks you're cute. And I was like, oh, word? That's what's up. Because the homegirl, she was cute too. But I froze, bro. I don't think I said anything to her outside of, you know, here's my card. Thank you. Have a nice day. And then I left. And the whole way home, I'm like kicking myself, because I'm like, dog, you got to man up a little bit. Like, what are you doing here? And so like the next day, I think I went back and the cute girl wasn't there, but the friend still was. So I was like, hey, you know, I'm gonna leave my number for your homegirl if you could pass it to her, and you know, we'll see what's up. She's like, all right, bet. And then the girl texted me. She's like, hey, it's so-and-so from Subway. I was like, oh shit, bet. And so we talked for a little bit. And, you know, I would go up to Subway and drive her to her house, you know, back home, because she didn't have a car. She would be walking home a couple miles and shit. And then eventually I asked her to be my date to homecoming, and she said yes. And so we go to homecoming, and this girl, let me tell you, she can move her hips in a way that 16-year-old me was not accustomed to hips moving. Okay. And in 2007, you know, grinding was all the rage. So, you know, I had a good time at homecoming. That shit was cool. And then afterwards, we like go to Chili's and with the rest of my friend group or whatever. And it was a good time. Drop her off at home that night. And, you know, I'm like, all right, see you later. I think I'm went in for a kiss. Maybe I asked for the kiss. I don't know. But either way, I didn't get the kiss. I think she like gave me her cheek or something like that, which is fine. No issues there. But I come to find out later on that she actually had a boyfriend this entire time, and the only reason she was interested in talking to me is because she wasn't a gold digger. She was a meal digger, bro. She was tired of eating those free footlongs all day, every day, and wanted some new food. And so the fact that I took her out to Chili's was apparently all she wanted from me. And after she got it, she dropped me. And I was sick, bro. I was absolutely gutted. I was like, damn, it's like that? You just wanted some fucking honey crispy chicken tenders? Absolute madness, bro. And yeah, so I went home, got on MySpace, changed my song to Icebox, and I was like, man, girls suck. Fuck all that shit. You know, I got a cold heart now, and I try to be, you know, some cool guy who didn't care about anything. But that is not the kind of person I really am. I have emotions. I was in my feelings. I posted some status update on Facebook about how girls are vampires, hella dramatic, just over the top. But another girl ended up seeing that status update, sent me a message lending a sympathetic ear, and she and I ended up dating. So the moral of the story is, when life hands you lemons, I guess you make chili strawberry lemonade. But my real question is, if Shorty only wanted some new meals and was tired of eating Subway, why was she still dating the dude who apparently wasn't providing those meals, you know? But I guess he could have been providing something else. Maybe she wasn't tired of all footlongs. Anyway, that is the end of my tangent. If you're still here listening, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, as that helps the show continue to grow. Please and thank you. But now that Johnny has been convinced that the Mangler is indeed possessed, Mark says they need to properly identify the demon that has possessed it, or at least the ingredients used to summon it, because using the wrong exorcism ritual could have catastrophically bad results. And as they work on that, over at the Blue Ribbon, Linsu gets her hand caught in the Mangler, but Stanner is able to pull her out before she's pulled all the way in. However, she loses a finger in the process. Stanner wants to rush her to the hospital, but Gartley's like, nah bro, bring her to me instead, I'll take care of it. Which sounds ominous as fuck. Meanwhile, Johnny pulls up to the factory, and he decides to do some Spider-Man shit and scales a pipe to climb up through an open second floor window, trying to be all stealthy. But then he proves how bad he is at this stealth shit because he falls on the ground and makes a bunch of noise anyway. May as well have come through the front door. As he makes his way across the factory floor, he ends up seeing the Mangler and leans against it to light up a cigarette. But the machine grabs hold of his trench coat and starts pulling him in. Now, a normal person in this situation might simply, you know, slip their arms out of the sleeves and free themselves that way. But nope, not Johnny. This dude is built differently. This man takes out his gun and shoots his coat. He shoots his coat until he can tear himself free. Hella overkill. He then storms into Gartley's office to confront him about shutting down the machine for good, and Gartley has some thinly veiled threat about that being a bad career move for Johnny. And I haven't yet mentioned that Gartley has some disabilities. He's blind in one eye, plus he walks with crutches due to having metal braces on his legs, which is important information to know now because Johnny says he'll shove those crutches up his moldy ass. Johnny and Gartley have this back and forth exchange about power and money, and how Johnny can't do shit because he lacks both of those things, and also he broke into the factory in the first place. So Gartley says some ominous shit about how there's a little bit of him in the machine and a little bit of it in him. Sacrifices had to be made. Johnny is like, what the fuck does that even mean, before he leaves because he has no other choice. Stanner then enters the office trying to convince Gartley to shut down the machine, Gartley says his daddy bought it when he was a little boy and that it was the best business decision he ever made. But Stanner was like, bro, like, did you forget that shit literally killed your 16-year-old daughter? And Gartley chalks it up to necessary sacrifices. There's that word again. Stanner's like, nah, bro, this is too much, and I'm thinking about shutting it down myself if you won't. And he leaves to mull it over, and Gartley makes a call to the sheriff telling him to deal with Johnny and make him back off. As Johnny is driving away, the sheriff radios him and tells him to end the investigation. And Johnny's like, nah, bro, you're in Gartley's pocket. I'm not listening to you. He's like popping off, which eventually leads to him being fired. But who has time to be concerned about trivial things such as unemployment while there is a demonic laundry machine causing chaos? We then cut to Lin Su, who seems like a completely different person now. She's laying up in Gartley's office/bedroom in lingerie, where previously she was in literal tears at the thought of being touched by this man. She now is full concubine, I guess. And he tells her he needs to show her something, and he pulls out a contract from his safe. He made a deal with the beast in the machine and signed it in blood. Now that the Mangler has eaten Lin Su's finger, she is now part of the club too. Johnny regroups with Mark, and the two of them prepare to perform an exorcism using what Mark calls Christian white magic, which is a very loaded phrase there. Mark says he's glad they don't have to worry about a hand of glory / belladonna because a demon conjured with that ingredient would have what he calls powerful black juju, also a very loaded statement. But a demon conjured using belladonna would be unaffected by the exorcism. Mark's confident that virgin's blood was the only ingredient utilized, but Johnny has his doubts. Over at the Blue Ribbon, Stanner has made up his mind. He's going to shut down the machine, so he pulls in another employee to assist. He has him cut the power to the Mangler and even raises the safety bar as an added precaution. Sherry then shows up planning to tell her uncle that she's quitting the family business, but while she does all that stuff, Stanner reaches his hand in to do something with the tool that I guess will shut down the machine, and of course, he ends up getting his hand caught when the Mangler turns on and chews up his arm. The other worker breaks the emergency glass on a fire axe and comes to chop Stanner's arm off at the shoulder in an effort to save him, but he ends up bleeding out and dying anyway. Now, throughout the film, whenever Johnny was at a crime scene, there's been a photographer there / older wise man kind of character that has been, kind of talking to Johnny on the side, hinting at nefarious goings on in the town. And his name is JJJ Pictureman. Yeah, real on the nose name there. But Mr. Pictureman left behind a portfolio for Johnny and Mark, and as they look through it, they see that there's like news clippings inside. The first one is of the column about the death of Gartley's daughter in the Mangler on her 16th birthday. Another one is a column about a girl who was reported missing when she failed to show up at her 16th birthday party. And a third column mentions the judge's daughter being reported missing, having last been seen at her, you guessed it, 16th birthday party. More columns are in this portfolio, including the sheriff's daughter and other families who all happen to be among the town's wealthiest and most powerful. Putting the pieces together along with Gartley's earlier villain monologue about power and sacrifice, Johnny and Mark deduce that human sacrifices were made in exchange for wealth and power, and that Sherry is next up to be offered to the Mangler. So Johnny calls her house to tell her to stay inside and comes to find out that today is her 16th birthday. Last episode, when we chopped up The Mist, I threw out the theory that one of the themes of that film was how far is a parent willing to go to save their children? What are they willing to sacrifice for the well-being of their child? And this movie seems to be asking the polar opposite question. What is someone willing to sacrifice their child for? And apparently, being the sheriff of a small town in Maine is worth throwing your 16-year-old daughter into an industrial folding machine. As Sherry mills about at home, she enters a room and discovers a birthday cake sitting there with lit candles. Gartley then pops out of a door, telling her all creepily and menacingly to make a wish. And she says she wishes he was dead, which is a sick burn. And Lin Sue then runs up from behind Sherry and smashes her with like a 2x4, breaks that shit like over her head, and pins her to the ground while Gartley doses her with chloroform. Lin Sue and Gartley return to the Blue Ribbon, and they lay Sherry down onto the Mangler's tread. And he says this is the final sacrifice because after this, his debt will be paid in full. Mark and Johnny arrive in the nick of time and pull Sherry off the conveyor belt before she gets folded up, and fisticuffs ensue. Johnny gets Gartley to the ground and calls him once again a miserable piece of dog fuck, while Lin Sue and Mark squabble. And low-key, Lin Sue was piecing this dude up for a while, but eventually he's able to turn the table. She had him on the ropes, but he shoves her into the Mangler. R.I.P. Lin Sue, who to me was the most tragically sympathetic character in this film. She was a true victim. She begins by being seemingly coerced into a sexual relationship with a dude who's like 3 times her age. You know, he's the most powerful man in the entire town. If she were to rebuff his advances, I'm sure he has the means to make her life a living hell. So maybe she felt like she had to go along with it. And after all that stuff happens, she loses a finger because it gets chomped up by some demonic machine. And then she like goes full Stockholm syndrome. She becomes Gartley's accomplice and is willing to sacrifice her friend to this machine and all this shit. Just absolutely sad downfall for her. But surprisingly, Gartley is actually sad when he sees Lin Sue get folded up, and Johnny takes this opportunity while he's distracted to falcon punch him, and he flies into this arm-like bar of the Mangler, which then like grabs him and pulls him over to get folded up himself. Only his lower body gets mangled though, so he dies a very slow, painful death, which he kind of had coming. But with one villain out of the way, there's still the Mangler to deal with, so Mark starts reading the exorcism rites and tasks Johnny with sprinkling holy water onto the machine on his signal. And shit is chaotic. The Mangler is shooting out steam and smoke and sparks while Mark is reading these Latin incantations. Johnny is throwing crucifixes and reading scripture while waving a Bible around. They're just trying everything. Things quiet down and it seems like they've won. Hugs and kisses are exchanged all around, and Johnny pulls out his trusty bottle of antacids that he swiped from Mrs. Frawley's belongings when he went to go visit her back at the morgue earlier in the film, which, I mean, she doesn't need him anymore, but also seems a little distasteful there. But he pops the lid and chews a couple, and again, gross, but Mark asks for one too. He doesn't normally take drugs, he says, but he wants to know what's in it, so he reads the label. His face drops as he sees that belladonna is one of the ingredients and says, "I think we may be fucked." The Mangler then roars back to life and begins to change. It sprouts mechanical arms and legs. It pulls itself out of the ground and starts chasing them. Yeah, they're definitely pretty fucked. As confident as Mark was that virgin's blood was the only summoning ingredient used, he was completely wrong, because if you recall, whenever Mrs. Frawley got pulled into the Mangler, she had first spilled her bottle of antacids onto the conveyor belt, so yeah, the Mangler had virgin's blood and belladonna, so a stronger demon than anticipated was conjured. As the gang runs away trying to escape from the Mangler, they get trapped by a locked door, and Mark is captured and subsequently torn in half. Johnny and Sherry are able to escape through a little hatch in the door, and Sherry tries to throw herself into the Mangler thinking it will stop if it has her, but Johnny's like, "What the fuck? Nah, don't do that," and he pulls her free. But it first mangled her hand and got one of her fingers. They then jump down into the sewer while the Mangler shoots flames at them, but they're able to dodge those flames by hiding out in the sewer tunnels, and they escape back to the streets through a manhole. Johnny's able to get Sherry to the hospital, and the doctor says that she's lost a lot of blood, but she'll be alright. He asks if Johnny minds telling him what happened, and this dude literally says, "Yes, actually, I do mind." He is so overly serious that it is hilarious. The doctor says that Johnny can come back tomorrow to visit Sherry, and as he walks away and waves back, we see one of his fingers is missing. And as Johnny returns home, he sees that he's received a letter from JJJ Pictureman, warning him not to trust anyone in town who is missing a body part, because that means they fed it to the Mangler and are now part of the machine, and the machine is part of them. So this doctor is part of the Mangler cult. Seems like everyone in the town in a position of power or some, elevated position of status is down with the Mangler. And I just don't get it, bro. If you're going to be sacrificing your body part and your child to this thing in exchange for wealth and power, why are you just settling for being a doctor at a hospital in a tiny town in Maine? Why not head of oncology at big Boston hospital XYZ? Why not aim higher? That doesn't really make very much sense to me. Sometime later, Johnny pulls back up to the blue ribbon and business is running as usual. The Mangler is back in its usual place, and now Sherry is the boss. She sees him and waves, and in doing so reveals her missing finger. So she's part of the Mangler cult now too. After all that. But what's really strange here, tell me why this old ass dude, this grown-ass man, showed up with a bouquet of flowers to give a 16-year-old? That was very strange behavior. And once he sees that she has, completely taken the place of her uncle, he throws the flowers in the trash like a jilted lover and leaves. What is up with this town and its pervy dudes? Yuck. But Johnny hops in his car, drives away. Evil wins. End of movie. Not exactly a happy ending. So let's talk themes. We touched on it earlier. This idea of how far is one willing to go for wealth and power? What are you willing to sacrifice to get it? And in many instances in this town, that answer was children. So big yikes. But along those same lines, though, while they have obtained this wealth and power from the Mangler, they are still beholden to, its whims. They have to make these sacrifices periodically. I don't know if it's every 16 years or what, but they're not really the ones in control. So there exists this illusion of control. And not just with the townspeople or the ones who are in charge, but it extends to other characters as well. Mark thought he had everything under control. He was certain that there was no belladonna utilized when it came to summoning this demon. He knew for sure that reading this Latin incantation and sprinkling holy water on the machine would banish the demon back to hell, and he was completely wrong. Ended up getting himself killed. The sheriff seems like he's in control of things when he fires Johnny from the police force, but that order came from the judge. And the judge, he has the sheriff in his pocket, but his orders come from Gartley. And Gartley has to constantly, or at least on more than one occasion, make sacrifices to the machine to pay off his blood debt. So everyone reports to someone. As much as they think they control the people beneath them, all of their direction comes from people above them. So where is the control exactly? And finally, Johnny. There's a brief scene in the movie where it's mentioned that Johnny's wife / Mark's sister died in a car crash when Johnny was the one behind the wheel. So he carries this guilt around with him. Mark tries to tell him that it wasn't his fault, and Johnny says, well, I was the one driving. He thinks it's possible he could have prevented things from occurring or, controlling the situation when that wasn't the case. I don't think they say it explicitly. I think it's just implied that their car was struck by someone else. So in that situation, what exactly is Johnny expected to do? How could he possibly avoid that tragedy? And he thinks that by pulling Sherry out of the Mangler's clutches at the end of the film, that he's being the hero, that he's granting her a chance at a full life, a new life, an opportunity to grow up. But all he did was just create the heir apparent to this Mangler cult. Had he not tried to take control of the situation and just let Sherry make her own decision, presumably there wouldn't have been anyone else to perpetuate this cycle, because it seems like someone in the Gartley family has to be the one that leads things. They have to run the industrial laundry. They have to provide the Mangler with periodic sacrifices. And Gartley himself said that once Sherry was sacrificed, then his debt would be paid in full. But instead, because Johnny pulled her out, the Mangler only got her finger, which then indoctrinated her as opposed to ending things. And so now she gets to take over and feed the next batch or batches of sacrifices to the Mangler, which I think also leads to a theme of people being unable to break free of generational cycles of family trauma. So Gartley's dad was the first one who brought the Mangler on board. So who knows who he sacrificed? Probably Gartley's older sibling. Gartley then has to inherit that burden, sacrifice his own child. He's prepared to sacrifice his niece, who survives and then takes on the mantle from him. And once Sherry has a child, I would imagine she will then have to sacrifice that child, and so on and so forth. As bad as this movie was, in my opinion, I think it does provide some interesting things to think about, especially as it relates to the cycles of generational familial trauma, because who can't relate to that? We all have some shit in our families that, it's always quote unquote been done that way, or that's just how they are, and all that stuff. And people teach us things and we internalize those things and we struggle to overcome them, whether that's through therapy or whatever other means. And the cycle just perpetuates itself a lot of the time. Sometimes people are fortunate enough to be able to break free and forge their own path in life, but too many times people can't do that. And yeah, things just continue to be kind of shitty. But that's all for me. I'm out of here. If this past hour hasn't been the most excruciating experience of your life, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a rating on whatever platform you're listening on, preferably 5 stars. I'll see you in 2 weeks for the next Stephen King adaptation breakdown. But in the meantime, remember, always keep it spooky.